Hey guys, my name is Abhishek and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Code Studio. In today's video, I am going to continue our discussion about React hooks. Uh, Before we get started with this, if you like the kind of content that is coming on this channel, please do consider liking, dropping a huge thumbs up for the video, and also subscribing to the channel. It really motivates me to uh, bring forward better content for you guys. And if you have suggestions on what kind of videos you want, please do let me know in the comment section below. And with that out of the way, let's get started. So I have with me the fancy notes that I've written. One of the common use case that we see with a lot of front end or frontier apps is they usually subscribe to APIs and they fetch data after they're mounted on the browser. Just to give you a quick example, think of the Facebook web app. So when the Facebook's web app's React component is mounted onto your browser, it should have a way in which it calls an API to get all the post data. Uh, that is how it is able to render all the post data for you to interact with. So as you can see around the world or wherever React is being used, this is a very common use case. And today what we're going to do is we're going to try and build a React hooks example to serve this use case. So in the existing or in the old React way of doing it, we usually did it with this monolith code. We would have a componented mount, and in the componented mount, we would have very varied logic that we would fetch from the API, and then we would do some sort of massaging for the data. We would then set it to the state, and because it is set to the state, the whole render function would be called once again, and all the data, the relevant data, would be rendered onto our view. As you can see, this has a couple of problems, one of which is you're managing the lifecycle of the component by yourself, which might not seem to be a huge task given this is a very small component, but as you build more complex and more higher order components, meaning that the component depends on other components, this becomes very difficult. Managing life cycles is not a fun thing to do. So React hooks is an easy way for us to abstract ourselves from all of that and just use functional components, and the functional component is able to take care of the state as you would want it to. So with me I have a fake API which is the Json Placeholder. uh, it's available online, it's free to use. Basically what this does is this gives you an URL, and when you do a get call to that URL, it gives you some fake data, and this is going to be useful for us because we want to integrate with an API and see how React hooks is able to help us in that department. So with me over here, I have the plain vanilla React app, which is just a simple div that is throwing out hello world. Let's go ahead and build the integration with the to-dos API that JSON placeholder has given us. So first of all, let's copy the URL here. So just so that we don't have to keep going back to it. Okay, so what we need to do from over here is first we need to create two variables to manage our to hold our stateful data, which is to-dos and set to-dos, and this is in line with what we discussed in the earlier video. So you'll have a state and the initial value will be an empty array. So I have a to-dos app and I use the setter for that is set to-dos function, and the initial value of to-dos is an empty array. So with that, we will then have to build up what this would look like. So our section would look like something like this. So we it based on the length of to dos, we would either print out if this has length, we would render out an element which is like div something, or we would render out a string that says no to dos found. Okay, and there are some white spaces, let me get rid of that. Okay, so what this is doing is basically it is rendering out selectively if there are few to dos to show. It's going to render out an element. We're going to build that element in a second, and if there are no elements, it's going to say no to dos found. So the element would first have a h1 which would say to dos and a nice hyphen, and then it will have a list, and that list will again be based on the to dos we have, and each one will give an element. So if we go and look into the to dos, what it's giving us a bunch of fields. One is user ID, title, and completed. So let's just use ID and title to show that we are able to integrate with the API. Again, we're not going to do fancy processing on this data. That is not the intent of the video. The intent of the video is to figure out how React hooks would satisfy one of the most common use cases of React apps. And this would again be a parameterized string with ID as the specific to-do item's ID and its title as the specific to-do item's title. Okay, once we save this and go into our React app, ideally we should see no to-dos found, because we haven't set to-dos to anything, and the only way we'll be able to set to-dos is to do a API call to the given URL. So with React hooks, the way we do the API call is with the use effect React hook. So what use effect React hook does is it takes in a function as a parameter, and basically that function is called whenever the component is mounted or updated or removed. So use effect is the hook that is called when a component is mounted, updated, or removed. So basically you can imagine it as the Facebook's React app has mounted to the browser. The Facebook's React app has changed in some way. You have clicked some element on it. And removed is you have clicked a game on Facebook, and that game has mounted to the DOM, and the Facebook's posts section has unmounted, right? So these are the 3 times the use effect React hook would be triggered. So this is how we would define the use effect function. So first we would import it, and basically it takes in a function. So what we want to happen is once our app, the app React component that we have, is mounted onto the browser, we want the use effect function to fetch the data from the given URL and update our to-dos. So the way we do it is we use the React's native fetch function, and we fetch from the URL, and basically it's based on a promise. So you have to do dot then. It gives you a response, and you convert that response into a JSON, and then you have the response as a JSON, which is exactly this data. So what you would do is you would first have, let me move this to next line because I wanted to also talk about something. So basically you will have one function which will be basically the data. So this is the data that you are getting, and with that what you would do is you would do set to-dos to data, plain and simple, right? And the next function that you want to pass in is error. So what this does is it will catch any error that is happening in the API. So what you would do is something like okay. So oops, yeah, this should be good enough. Yeah. So what this is doing is use effect function is fetching from this given URL. It is getting the response, converting that into a JSON, and that JSON is exactly what you see over here. And with that, it is setting our to-dos to that data, and we have also passed a function to handle errors. So if an error happens, what it will do now is in the browser console, it will log the error. Again, this is not ideal practice. In production code, you're not going to log the error in the front end. You'd probably throw it, or you would probably log it to your internal systems, but you would never log it onto your browser. But again, not the intent of the video, just want to show how that errors also can be handled over here. So let's go ahead and save this and see what happens over here. We see that there is nothing. Very nice. To-dos.length, to-dos has a length, and to-dos dot for each, we have a to-do, and we try to get this. Okay, let's see what the error is. So in I don't see any error over here as well. So really funny on why this is not coming. I was just trying if there is another parameter that we need to pass in. So there is to-dos.length. Okay, let's do this. So to-dos exist, but I don't understand why to-dos dot for each doesn't exist. Very funny. Let's try. So what this is doing is this is logging our to-dos to the console. Oh, we do have it. Nice. So we are able to get the ID and title. Should this return it? I have literally no idea what is happening over here. Okay, probably I should map it. Oh, because for each does not return. Got it. Yes, guys, important learning today. So the learning is if you used for each does not return the value. So instead use the map function, which will create an array of the new mapped variables. So yeah, nice. We did a good debug session as well. So fun thing is we were able to debug it, or it would have been super embarrassing on record, or I would have edited it out. But if you have been watching the videos, you know that I don't edit anything out. So anyway, we have been able to get the data from this API, and we have been able to show it in a not so fancy way, but that wasn't the intent. The intent was for us to understand how we would handle calling APIs in a functional component, and this is how we would do it. Very plain, simple. It's like 5-6 lines of code, but in the same thing, if you had to do it in a stateful component, you would do something like this, which is super long, super hard to read, and super hard to understand. And the advantage of this is you don't have to worry about what you would do if, for example, uh, if you wanted to do this API call, if something changed, for example, there was a button and with that you could add a to do. In that case, what you would have to do in the old way is you would have to write a component did update function, and in that you would have to basically necessarily write the same function once again. But with having it in use effect, if any change happens to this component, the component will remount, and because it is remounting, use effect will be called internally without you having to intervene. Isn't that super cool? Uh, with that, I want to end today's video. It's pretty longer than what I expected it to be. But anyway, I hope we were able to cover some concepts that will be valuable to you in your day-to-day or in your coding journey. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.